Hi Sugar Plums, these are some thoughts on Magick. Just a few sort of odds and ends that I don't feel are big enough to kind of make a whole video about, but which I'd kind of like to mishmash together in a way. So I'd just like to begin by saying, for those of you who are watching this who are quite new to the idea of working magic or manipulating energy and you're not really sure where to begin with it, I would say obviously getting in tune with your ability to feel energy and to understand how it works is paramount. And it's quite difficult to be able to see your way to doing that at first because it's quite an abstract thing to become involved with. After a while, it doesn't seem abstract, it feels like second nature. But when you first start out, trying to find that groove in the wood to actually get working with energy and get understanding how to manipulate it and how everything's made of it and how it vibrates at different frequencies and stuff can be quite a head spinning exercise and a sort of a difficult feat to imagine yourself accomplishing. So what I would suggest is, obviously a lot of witches on YouTube and a lot of ideas in books will go very heavily towards this idea of getting in touch with the four elements and understanding how they work energetically, how they feel to you, how you connect with them emotionally and so on. And I think working with the cardinal directions and the four elements is obviously a really good starting point. But if that doesn't really mesh with you, or if you found that you're trying to do it but you feel like you want some other kind of avenues as well to go down, because I know for me when I first started out on the path, working with the four elements was a lot more difficult for me than it is now. Actually, I found working with the energies of the elements and associating them with my magical abilities and so on, and how to manifest my will, that's something that came along much later for me, in fact. I'm much more in tune with the four elements now than I was when I first started out. When I first started out, I think I realised very quickly that I wanted to involve myself in some stuff that wasn't to be found in your ordinary witchcraft source material. So it was quite difficult for me to find, as I say, that groove in the wood. So what I would suggest you do is try to imagine energy, conjure up energy, bring energies together between your two hands. And this is something that you do not need to cast a circle for. It doesn't need to be something that you do in ritual. It's something that you can do as an ongoing exercise to kind of help further your exploration of how energy is all around you and how it can be kind of mustered and harnessed and gathered together to manifest your intention. Or even just to feel it, you know, just as a kind of affirmation to you that it is there and that you are part of it also, that you're not divorced from it. What I would suggest is something that I started doing when I was around 15 or 16, is just simply cupping my hands together like this, as though I'm ready to receive, and imagining a ball of white light or a ball of energetic motion between my two hands, and kind of over time feeling the resistance that was coming into being, and feeling how it felt heavy or how it felt like it was moving around, how I felt it was performing some kind of action between my hands. I might raise my hands around it to press it into a ball and feel it compress, and just kind of concentrate on the emotions that I feel whilst doing that. And then maybe start to manipulate it, start to twist it, start to turn it around and see how that feels. Because I think a lot of the time we look for energy, we look for our feelings and emotions towards energy by placing them into context in terms of what we've seen in books or what we've been told to do by other witches. But that might seem kind of difficult to do. It might seem very abstract. It's difficult at first to get a link between your emotions, your perception of energy, and things like the cardinal directions, the four elements, etc., your sense of spirit and such. So I think sometimes it's just better to visualise and to play with the idea of energy and how you can bring it to you and how it kind of swells around you and how you can take ownership of that, if you see what I mean. I also think other interesting ways to start feeling energy and exploring how to actually harness it and have a relationship with it would be through using things like crystals or plants or trees. And also being nearby humans and animals and actually feeling the energy that they give off. You know, often when you walk into a room after an argument has taken place, you haven't been told that the argument's taken place, you didn't see the argument take place, but you instantly feel an energy, a strange kind of traversing energy which doesn't feel wholly positive, and you know that something has gone down. That is just a very simple and very ordinary, commonplace way of getting in touch with a level of energy that's vibrating in a room and how it doesn't mesh with your vibrational energy. That's as simple and as easy as manipulating energy really is. It's about feeling it, it's about empathising with it and understanding how your vibrational flow contracts or relaxes against it, the relationship that the two vibrational frequencies actually have. That's as simple as it is, just that instinct that energy is different, or that energy is present, that can be used, utilised, or that is disharmonious in some way. So think about how you actually do that on a day-to-day basis, and that can be very interesting. And I think a lot of witches early on the path get a lot of energetic resonance from being around animals as well, and from focusing on the different vibrational flow between the animal in the room and you. Might be quite an interesting one. I think for me, my magical experiences, as I said, I don't really myself see any huge difference between ritual and magic per se. I understand my core difference to be I wouldn't potentially put out will towards a specific focus area during ritual. However, I do feel that something about ritual changes not only my perception and my inner being, but changes the world around me on some level too. So I do consider it to be a magical working. I also consider ritual to be the meeting of the two realms, if you like. So I consider it to be the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. So that, again, I feel to be magical in and of itself, although I'm not actually performing a magical working to go ahead and manifest some specific intention. I do feel that ritual is a magical act. And I feel that lots of other things are magical acts as well. But yeah, ritual for me takes place in a circle, and I might not necessarily do any magical working, but it will be something that I feel is a magical act. I feel that my journey with magic has taken some very crazy twists and turns, and I'd like to talk about some of them in the course of this video. I really do feel that the energy that is generated from our emotional spectrum and from being at one point or another on our emotional spectrum can be very useful and is something that shouldn't be overlooked. For example, the energy that you manifest during a spurt of extreme anger is energy that can be almost bottled, if you like, and used for a different specific purpose, either to encourage healing or to encourage the creative life force within you, something like that. So I think that magic, in a sense, has helped me to be more in control of my emotions, because I realise that at certain points on the emotional spectrum, I can recognise vast quantities, vast reserves of energy coming up within me and bubbling all at the same time and changing my frequency to such an extent that, in a sense, once you've realised that you can control that energetic frequency and you can use it for something extremely productive, then you can change anger into creativity, or you can change sadness into healing. And I think this also helps you with your focus when you're angry or anxious or sad. I think it can help with where you actually place that energy and how productive you can actually be with it. If you are always thinking in terms of your ability to manifest your intent through your energy, then when you feel this huge bubbling surge of energy come up within you, it might occur to you not to punch a mirror, not to have a go at your best friend whose fault it directly isn't, but instead to focus on how you can use the energy to produce something, either magically speaking or in other aspects of your life, which in a sense is magic also. If you're taking energy that's come from being on one point in your emotional spectrum and you're actually turning it in to energy that's for something else, something that's going to be productive or healing, something that really interests you, something that's going to help you get in touch with your deepest self, then that, in a sense, even if it's not done in the circle and it's not considered per se to be a magical working, it's pretty magical. So I think that's one thing that I've really come to learn from my own magical experiences, is that my emotions are actually very useful, and my emotions don't actually have to be harmful so much as they can be helpful to me if I allow them to be. And that's probably one area of my magical graduation, if you like, which has really helped me to become the kind of witch that I really wanted to be, was understanding that there is no difference between the magical and the mundane, as we like to call it. I can look at my emotional spectrum as a way to get something truly magical out of circle work or to manifest my intent. So yeah, I do think that playing around with the emotional spectrum and understanding the energy that is underlying in the emotional spectrum is very important. I also wanted to talk a little bit about demons and about the idea of demons as psychological constructs. Now, in certain aspects of the esoteric world, the occult world, the movie world, and certain areas of Christian thought, it is very dangerous to make a pact with a demon. But I don't see demons in the Christian view of things, and I don't necessarily see them as entities in and of themselves. I believe that everything is consciousness, and I believe that everything is one. So depending upon your belief system, or depending upon the system of belief that you are choosing to use for your particular magical working, you may agree or disagree with this. But I feel that when we look at our demons as little shards of the shadow self, which is kind of broken off, they've broken off and they are less accessible to us. They're less accessible to our conscious control over them. So they might manifest as bad behaviours or negative cycles or things that we feel that we can't actually have any say over. They, in a sense, are what I would define as my demons. Little rogue pieces of the shadow that have broken off and are kind of tearing through my unconscious on some kind of horrible Harley Davidson, and I can't get a hold of them. I can't get them into perspective, and I don't really understand what they look like, what they want from me, how I relate to them emotionally, and how I can regain and harness some control over them. So in that sense, the idea of using a conceptual view of making a pact with a demon is very interesting, because if you look at your demons as your psychological constructs, those parts of you that are out of reach and are out of bounds in a sense, or that have some kind of hold over you, then you can look very much at trying to break down and dismantle those demons into pieces of information that are more comprehensible to you. So for example, if you just feel that this bad behaviour or this negative thought pattern comes up and you're not really sure where from, you don't understand which conditions it needs to actually thrive, you don't really see any correlation between your daily waking life and how this negative behaviour keeps getting a hold over you, you're not really sure, then what you need to do is you need to get to know that demon by dismantling it, by observing it, by forming an emotional detachment from it in order for you to observe it scientifically as such. And then after you've gotten to know this demon, after you've actually given it some kind of colouring, some kind of emotional basis on which to look at it and say, right, this is it, this is the demon, this is roughly what it looks like or how it feels, or these are the conditions that it needs in order to be really present. These are the times in my life during which I really have no control over it, where it seems to come up and I just can't do anything about it. Once you've actually gotten to know the personality of that part of your psychological construct, then you can make a pact with it, or you can communicate with it, or you can do certain things in magic to allow your imagination to regain that hold over it. I think that there's a lot to be said for looking at your psychological makeup in magic, and this is something that I may go a lot deeper into, but I'm not sure how I wanted the channel to be set out in terms of how much I discuss my own practice and my own ideas, particularly since a lot of them are quite off the wall, I think, in terms of what other people are talking about, so I'm not sure how relevant they'll be to a lot of you. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for having a look at different parts of your psychological makeup and actually designing for those parts characters. Things that you can actually look at that aren't quite so abstract. You could take a look at a negative behaviour and you could give it a name, you could give it a sigil, you could give it a symbol of some kind, you could give it even an appearance. You could give it certain things that it likes or doesn't like, that in magical working you can kind of use to disconcert it or confuse it or have your hold over it. I think these things, when we're looking at the psychological model in magic, are incredibly useful. And, you know, the psychological model in magic for me is the whole animal, although I do use belief as a tool, so I will play with other beliefs too. But belief as a tool is not something that can come overnight for you. You can't suddenly decide one morning, I'm going to be a Satanist today because it serves a certain agenda for me. Belief as a tool is something that needs to be worked very, very hard to achieve, and there are certain ways of doing that and getting into that I will go on and discuss at a later date. I briefly also wanted to discuss servitors here and the creation of magical entities. The idea of servitors actually can be found throughout different magical ideas and different systems of witchcraft. It's not just exclusive to chaos magic, but I think it was brought into popular knowledge in the occult by the appearance of chaos magic and different chaos magic authors talking about the creation of servitors. Now, a servitor is a magical entity or a spirit entity of some kind that you bring into being to serve a specific purpose for you. And it might have a time limit on it, or it might be commanded so that it only comes around at certain times when you need it. You will have kind of like a word to summon it, or a visualization that you'll use to bring it forth. And it's supposed to either be a place for residual feelings or residual issues to go, It can be a sphere of light, it can be a creature, it can be a cat on a skateboard, if you're anything like Phil Hine. It can be any of the above. Basically, it's asking you to really use your imagination, to branch out and work out a way to feed a construct with energy in order to manifest a certain intention. That's something that really interests me, and that links back to what I was saying about demons as psychological constructs as well, because really what can be helpful for you when you're looking at parts of your personality which are very inconvenient, very destructive, parts of your personality that you can't really get under your wing, developing an image or an idea or a certain set of personality traits that kind of center on this negative pattern of behavior can make the demon, the psychological demon, all that more real to you, and you feel that you're able to have a relationship with it, you're able to interconnect with it, and you're able to stop it so much from getting through your boundaries when they're weak, as well as strengthening your boundaries at the same time. So that's something that can be interesting. And I have read in a few places over the years ideas about getting other people's demons under control, working with other people's psychological demons, particularly partners who have addiction issues, whatever. I don't personally do that kind of thing. I do believe in magic for the purposes of healing, and I do kind of send out, I don't want to say generalise because they're very, very intense, but if you see what I mean, I send out healing which is broad in spectrum and scope, and which could be used in a number of different ways by the person I'm sending it out to. So it's not necessarily that I'm looking at a specific intention to manifest in somebody else's life, which I think is not helpful. And it's not part of my personal set of guidelines. Everybody has to have their own set of personal guidelines, and if you're doing what you're doing out of love, then you're not going to see anything wrong with it. But in my personal ethos, that's not really what I'm called to magical working to do. But I do feel that, again, that can be very interesting, helping perhaps to make somebody else's psychological constructs less abstract and more available to them, so that they can make sure that they're not kind of so out of control. I've toyed a lot with my interest in ego magic and in things like deconstructing the ego and such. And ego magic in the chaos magic construct is very important because when you're using belief as a tool, when you're actually kind of, I don't know, surfing the astral realm, or you're looking for things that really speak to you, you want to make a ritual which is a mishmash of everything that's important, you're using syncretism, you're tying things together, you're seeing how things link on a kind of unconscious level, and you're kind of darting from one thing to another according to what really grabs your senses and according to what you really feel will work for that moment, because that's mostly what it's all about. The idea of ego magic is very important because it's basically about deconstructing your core personality, and it's about the idea that we need to step away somehow from a belief in core personality or from absolute stringent obedience to the core personality in order to have a look at what our other selves are saying or wanting to do, or in order to in fact take on parts of the personality or parts of character that for us seem strange or alien. In a lot of ways, for me, magic and ritual in some senses is a lot like acting or theatre, in the sense that you need to be prepared to feel empathy for certain things, certain feelings and behaviours, for example, that aren't of you. And this is a lot really to do with invocation as well. If you've ever invoked deity, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. It's about getting yourself so intensely upon that visualization, so becoming one with the deity that you want to actually invoke and you want to come into you, that you are almost on the threshold of becoming it when it actually enters you and when you start to kind of exhibit its posturing and its personality and its speech or whatever. Invocation is not a big part of my practice, but I'm using this as an example to kind of tell you where I'm going with that. Ego magic is about playing around with your sense of self, because the ego is really, when you strip it back, it's just your sense of self. And I have, in a sense, some difficulty with parts of the New Age community that talk about ego in a massively negative sense, because in fact I feel that's a potent misunderstanding in some ways of what the ego means. Ego itself as a word doesn't actually have a negative or positive connotation. Ego and the way we relate to our ego as human beings can be both positive and negative, depending on how we actually strike up a conversation with it and understand it and look at it and observe it. If your ego takes you over, if you're too obsessed with what other people think of you, if you're afraid of admitting to certain aspects of the shadow self, you know, any of these things. I'm not going to go massively into the ego debate here, but those things can make ego harmful and toxic and unhealthy. If you look at ego as your sense of self in terms of what's appropriate, how you want to conduct yourself in society, your goals, your aspirations, how you view yourself, your mirror reflection, if you like, in a psychological sense, that is not necessarily bad. If you had no sense of ego whatsoever, you'd probably be quite insane. And it would be very difficult for you to find your axis mundi, if you like, which I'll come to in a while, your core self, your core being, and your ability, of course, to work on your spiritual path and to perform magic. So ego magic is a lot to do with deconstruction. It's a lot to do with trying to take on new facets of being or new beliefs that are alien to you. And it's about really playing around with your sense of self and playing around with what that means to you. And that can be very powerful in magic. I'm not going to go into specific techniques for ego magic in this video, but it is something that I recommend that you check out and look into Crowley and look into chaos magic, maybe read Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine, which has an interesting little chapter in it on ego magic and why it's so important to kind of the arsenal of the chaos magician, if you like. So I think that's one thing that I've always toyed with on and off through my life, and it's something that with somebody as a very active imagination, I feel I've been able to achieve to a certain extent. But ego magic is also quite scary territory. I think personally that ego magic is one of the most, it's one of the parts of magic, the parts of the magical sphere that's made me feel the most vulnerable. And I think that's really because you are riding around on the high seas of the unknown, and you are really letting go of what is core to you and of what is understandable for you. You're letting go of what it means to be you, and you are taking on an incredible amount of new intoxicating information and really trying to go as far as you can with that, really becoming someone else or something else and embodying that for a certain time. And as I said, with any form of belief as a tool, this is quite difficult to do. It's not something that you can just do like that. It takes time and it takes dedication. So with belief as a tool, there really is a commitment there. And I think ego magic really speaks to me of that commitment, and it has been something that I've worked with and would like to work with a lot more. But as I said, there is a sense as well where you need to understand, first of all, before you begin ego magic, where your axis mundi is for you in the centre of your metaphysical universe. Now, if you don't know what the axis mundi is, look it up, have a quick read, and, you know, maybe if you just want to stay in wiki territory, you can do that. But if you wanted to branch out, there are absolutely hundreds of texts and hundreds of different spiritual pathways which kind of take on the notion of the axis mundi, which is basically the link between one realm and another. So it could be the link between heaven and earth. It could be the link between your earthly physical life and your magical ability, or your ability to reach the astral. For me, sometimes the axis mundi represents the physical realm and the astral realm and the way they link together. And for me, in the circle, with my sense of personal development, I might talk, for example, about my core being, my strong core, and how to be strong in that core. In magical working, I'm talking about the axis mundi, which is my ability, I feel, to be open to the metaphysical, to the unconscious, to other realms, to notions that don't necessarily tie in with consensus reality, whilst at the same time being strong in the earth, being grounded, understanding who I am when each layer is stripped back, the spirit of me, if you like. So even though I'm accepting my many selves and my many capabilities, I am within the circle. So in a sense, the circle is an axis mundi on its own. The circle is a space, a vessel, a void in time and space, where the magical energies are kind of tied in and fostered so that you can reach whatever it is you need to reach, whilst at the same time being grounded on the earthly realm. So it is in itself an axis mundi, but the human body, I feel as well, is an axis mundi. And the way I see it is I see it as my sense of being open whilst at the same time being stable. I see it as being traversing all over the place whilst at the same time being completely static. So I feel like, you know, you need to have a very strong connection with that premise, or some variation on that premise, before you start playing around with ego magic. I also think it helps if you've been through some shit before you start playing around with ego magic, but that's just me. Because I really feel like you have a strong sense of what it is and who it is that you're going to come back to once you've kind of put all of these layers on, these different items of clothing on, and played around with them and then taken them off again. You must have a sense that there is a certain spot where you belong and that you can get back to that spot in some way. So for me as well, it's kind of like I use astral projection quite a lot. I have a very strong connection with the astral, both in the dream world and when I'm actually doing astral projection waking. And I really feel like there's a lot to be said for that idea of the silver cord that astral travellers talk about, where they talk about how when they are leaving the body, they need to kind of leave a silver cord attached to the body, which goes up with them through into their ethereal body or into the astral. Their astral body, which actually connects and protects them and makes sure they can find their way home ultimately. Because it's the astral realm, if you've never been there, it's a little bit like Las Vegas on acid. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on there, and it's not like a visualization where you'll try and take quite tight and unique control over what's going on and what you'll see next. Astral travel is actually completely chaotic. It's 100% like a journey where you're not really sure of the destination or the stations that you're going to pass, and it's all very exciting. It can be quite easy to get addicted to it, I think, in some senses. So the silver cord is basically just an idea that astral travellers have, or they have variations on it, where they talk about how it's important to be able to find your way home ultimately. It's kind of like some astral travellers will say that that is bull and they've never had any problem with finding their way back into their body, into their sense of self, into the earthly realm per se, even after a very long journey. They will say that it's like... They will say that the whole idea of the silver cord and the whole idea of losing yourself during astral travel is kind of a bit like saying that if you go on holiday somewhere for 2 weeks, you won't remember where you lived when you get back into the country. That's how crazy it is. But for me, I kind of, even though I haven't had many of those issues, certainly not in the last 5 or 6 years anyway, during astral travel, I will say that it is possible to forget not only where you live, but who you are when you're on extremely strong drugs. And the astral realm is nothing if not sincerely trippy. So I do understand why the silver cord premise is important for some people, and I feel like the Axis Mundi in a sense is not only that, but is also the opening up to the astral realm. So it really is my silver cord during magic and ritual working. It's my way of saying I am ready, I can absorb, I am a clear channel, I am prepared for what's coming, but I am always me. I am I is kind of what the Axis Mundi represents to me. So that's very important before you start playing with things like ego magic, I think, is you need to have that place where you can stand strong in the earth, and you need to know where it is when you're trying to come back to it. A few other things I wanted to mention about different ways that I use magic. I like to use story magic, memory magic and art magic, all three of which are systems, the way I use them, that I've come up with quite independently and have written about at length, and I've tried to find and experiment with the best ways of doing all three. As I've said in former videos, I'm not actually big on magical working. It is going to become more of my path during the latter half of this year, although magic does always feature more in the colder months of the year anyway, but I have a few important goals and ideas that are coming into play regarding spell work, but ordinarily it is not in and of itself a big part of my path, although, as already stated, ritual for me is a magical working in and of itself. But spellcraft specifically is not something that I have what I would consider to be a huge amount of experience with in terms of what other people seem to be doing, and the amount of experience that others have, which, you know, is always quite impressive. But for me, it's not something that's ever been central. However, I have worked out very independent and stringent systems. I've experimented, I've crossed things out, I've written things in. I have certain systems that work for me, and I have certain ideas regarding magic that kind of call to me. My real belief with magic is that you find a system that works for you, or you create your own, and as long as it turns you on, that's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing that should matter. You cannot carry around a bunch of beliefs and systems that you've read in books which ultimately feel dead to you, but which you feel you need to respect because they're in books. That's not going to work. That's not going to make you into the most potent magical being that you can be. So you need to find your own way, and if your own way is, you know, eclectic Wicca, traditional hedge witchery, if it's Santeria, if it's voodoo, whatever it is, if it's like heathenry, and working with gods, or if it's whatever it is that you do, if you read it in a book and it totally resonated with you, if you embraced this tradition and it completely sat well with where you were, then that's absolutely where you should be. But don't think in any world that you need to adopt a tradition that's in a book, or that you need to adopt a tradition with this big lineage behind it. I sincerely don't believe that, and I think it's just very counterintuitive, in fact. I think it's quite surprising that various sections of the pagan and witchcraft community would state that tradition is paramount above all else, because surely personal power and your ability to get in touch with your own sense of what you can do is paramount above all else, and not everybody is going to find those things in a book. So I certainly didn't. So I've developed my own constructs, and I've developed my own way of doing things. And one thing that I love to use is story magic, because I write a lot of fiction. I actually really, really need to get my novel finished, but I haven't yet, but it's sat over there crying to me to finish it. So I might do that soon. But yeah, I write fiction. I've been published quite a few times under various different names because I'm a bit of a name freak. But it's something that I really love doing, and it's something that I hope to be able to progress with and have more discipline with. And story magic for me is a very intense kind of magic. Again, I'm not going to go into specific things that I do, but if you just consider, for example, the possibility of innate power that would come from writing a story with you as the central character, or inventing a bunch of central characters, anything like that, and actually weaving your energy into this story as you write it, and using symbology and representations of what you want to feel, what you want to achieve, what you want to banish, all of that kind of thing. Imagine writing that story, it taking as long as it takes, maybe putting it away when you're done with the first part of it, and then setting up sacred space and beginning to write again and again until it's done, and then think about the possibilities of what you could do with it magically once it's done. Would you bury it? Would you burn it? Would you cut it all up and put it back together again? Would you send it to an anonymous address, never knowing what might have happened to it or what the person that received it might have thought of it? The ideas, the possibilities with story magic are completely endless, and if you enjoy writing stories and your imagination is potent, then it's definitely something that you could get into. Memory magic, I think, is very potent for me. I feel in a lot of ways that time is not linear, and I think I've talked before about, you know, my personal knowledge of how time works, and how it drips and it seethes and it retreats and it advances, and it's kind of like wax dripping, but at the same time it's like TV static. I think time works in a lot of different ways, and I think that it's very sad that a lot of people just think of it as that timeline from birth to death, because as many pagans know, it's not like that. And as many drug takers know, it's not like that. So there are many different ways that you can think of time and of your own memory bank as ways to store and preserve certain things that you want to keep safe, as ways to have a safe haven for magic that you're developing. Maybe you want to build an astral altar for yourself, but you would like to use a certain space in time in your memory bank to do it. Maybe you want to go back to a beautiful place in your memory that you know you'll never see again and build your astral altar there. Or maybe you want to dump some shit off that you have in you now, which is from a certain part of your childhood. Maybe you want to go back there in magical working and dump that shit off there, leave it there in a bag at the door of the house of the nightmare of your childhood, and see what comes of that, because the memory is a very powerful place, and I get really excited by the possibilities with memory magic, and memory magic is one of the easiest forms of magic for me. It's something that I can do very simply. Again, this is all based on your own belief system. I'm really just choosing to talk today about some forms of magic that really switch me on, but I think it's very personal. I think my main points here are, one, to open up to you a little more of my practice, and secondly, to let you guys know that I really believe that magic is where the heart is for you. If you are truly inspired by something, if something really gets you right here, then there is every possibility that your intuition is calling out for you to use it in magical working or ritual working, because it's sparked that inspiration in you. And you could read 15 books on whatever kind of mythology it is that you really want to get into, because it's, you know, it represents your ancestors. But if it doesn't really call to you right there, and something else does, if something else fires your imagination, gets your neurons firing in a quicker and more easily achievable way, if something really generates energy and you don't even know why, but you know that it's something that you're really invested into, then surely, you know, if this system of mythology that you're reading through is laborious and you're having to write lots of notes but nothing is really clicking for you, then go for what clicks for you. That's genuinely how I see it. I don't know how anyone could see it any other way. Art magic as well, much like story magic, a similar thing. And you can make your artwork whilst in sacred space if you want to, or you can make it outside of the realms of sacred space and then take it into sacred space to use. But it's really just giving visual representation to thoughts, feelings, manifestations, desires, actions, memories, etc. And then using that art to do as you will with it to help you to manifest your intention. So that's another thing that I do quite often, and I really love that. And I also, in any books which involve me writing down spells, power thoughts, affirmations, that kind of thing, I will often use collage and mixed media to create representations of what I want those things to mean to me, or how I want them to look when they're completed, what I want the emotions to feel like, anything like that. I do that quite often. On the subject of taking what speaks to you, in chaos magic and in various other systems as well that are perhaps newer, or that echo back to like the ancient chaos goddesses, if you like, there is this idea of building up completely new mythological systems or introducing new gods into your practice. Phil Hine said once that chaos magicians are feared because they work with gods that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. That to a lot of people is quite scary. It's quite a weird premise, but it's something that I have been doing for absolutely years. I have been inventing characters that are comprised of certain primal energies or certain things within me that cannot be named, and I have given them characteristics, I have given them appearance, and I've given them meaning. And I really believe that everything that is currently powerful to somebody in terms of symbology or in terms of deity or in terms of concept is powerful because the amount of consciousness that's been thrown behind it. It's powerful because that power has been given to that symbol by us. We have placed it into our web of the collective unconscious to such an extent that it has power on its own. That's what I really believe. So I believe that I can do that myself as well. I don't think I need to wait for the perfect god or goddess to come along. I believe that quite often it's within my hands. So that's another thing. And Phil Hine said that, you know, working, for example, with the characters from Star Trek is going to be a lot more relevant to some modern chaos magicians than trying to work with a system of ancient mythology. It's just going to be more instantly and easily relatable. You're going to have more of an emotional pull towards the characters, and in a sense, any kind of program like that or book like that has within it its own mythology. All of the characters in it have their own ideas and their own character traits. You might summon them for different things. I'm not a Trekkie, sorry for anyone that is, but I can see where he's going with that, and that kind of thing is very important to me. Alice in Wonderland is a sacred text to me in some senses, as are the Narnia Chronicles, which I read from a very, very young child and which always had a very, very magical fascination for me, which I really, really believed were real, and I gave them very valuable primal parts of my consciousness. I wove them into my collective unconscious, into my little area of the collective unconscious, which is tied to us all. So I can see where he's coming from with that, and that's another thing that you might want to think about. What else did I want to say? No, that's all. These are some of my thoughts on different ways that I use magic and different ways that I feel we can push those boundaries. And I might talk more about it in another video. It kind of depends on how well this one is received. Because I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but these are just some magical thoughts I was having. Thanks for listening, guys. Blessed be.